The envelope landed on the kitchen counter like it weighed nothing. But Sandra knew what was inside. She had been expecting it for 11 days, ever since David changed the locks and moved Brenda into the master bedroom of a house that Sandra had never once put her name on, because her grandmother always said, "Never let a man know the full size of what you carry." She picked up the envelope, opened it slowly. Read the words "supervised visitation, twice weekly, 2 hours each session, subject to approval of temporary guardian." The temporary guardian was Brenda. David had made his wife ask his mistress for permission to see their children. Sandra set the paper down, walked to the window. Outside, Lagos was doing what Lagos always does, loud, relentless, unbothered. A bus conductor was shouting. A woman was selling groundnuts. 2 boys were laughing about something that had nothing to do with pain. Life completely indifferent to hers. She pressed one hand flat against the glass and closed her eyes. She was not crying. She had finished crying 4 months ago, the night she found Brenda's earring in her daughter's hair, placed there casually, like a flag planted in conquered land. That night something in Sandra shifted. Not broke. Shifted. Like a river that quietly changes course while the ground above it stays perfectly still. What did David Williams think he had married, and what had he missed entirely? Hello family, welcome back. Please hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up, it really supports our channel. Don't forget to share with your friends and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Sandra Coker grew up in a 2-room house in Ibadan with her grandmother, a woman named Grandma Rose, who wore simple cotton dresses and kept her money in 3 places nobody ever thought to look. Grandma Rose was not loud about what she had. She was precise. She owned farmland in Oyo and Ekiti that she never discussed at the dinner table. She had accounts in 4 different banks under 4 different registered businesses. She gave generously to people who needed it and said nothing afterward. "Silence," she told Sandra once, when Sandra was 12 and furious about something a schoolmate had said, "is not weakness. Silence is the thing powerful people do while everyone else is making noise." Sandra listened. Sandra always listened. By the time she was 26, she had built her first investment vehicle, a quiet holding company registered under a name that had nothing to do with her. By 30 she had 3. By the time she married David Williams at 32, she had assets her accountant described, in a private memo she kept locked in a Zurich vault, as structurally significant. She never told David. Not because she was ashamed. Because she was careful. David was charming and ambitious and handsome, and for the first 4 years he was also kind. He ran a mid-sized construction firm in Lagos that struggled quietly until Sandra began routing capital through a third-party investment structure that propped up his contracts, secured his credit lines, and twice saved him from collapse, all without his knowledge. She had not done it to control him. She had done it because she loved him. That was the part that hurt most. Not what he had become, but what she had believed he could be. Their daughters, Sophia 9 and Olivia 6, were everything. And now Brenda was braiding Olivia's hair and signing off on Sandra's visitation schedule like she had earned something. She had not earned anything. But Sandra was patient. She had learned patience from a woman who owned land she never announced. Her phone buzzed. A message from her lawyer, Funmi Okafor. "The document review is complete. Whenever you're ready, we move." Sandra looked at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back 2 words. Not yet. She had spent years building something enormous in silence. She was not going to spend it in a hurry. But something was coming, and David, laughing in a restaurant across town with Brenda on his arm, had no idea the ground beneath him was already moving. David Williams was the kind of man who believed his own story. He had built that story carefully. The sharp suits, the corner office on Victoria Island, the name that appeared in business columns beside words like visionary and self-made. He carried himself like a man who had arrived somewhere important, and most people in his circle were too impressed or too comfortable to ask him how he actually got there. Brenda encouraged all of it. She was 29, quick with flattery, and understood instinctively that the fastest way to hold a man like David was to make him feel larger than he was. She laughed at his jokes before he finished them. She told his friends he was the most brilliant man she had ever met. She had moved into his house with 2 suitcases and redecorated 3 rooms within a month, including the one where Sandra used to read to the girls at night. Sophia had stopped eating properly since Brenda moved in. Olivia had started wetting the bed again. David noticed neither thing. He was at Knock Restaurant on a Tuesday evening, hosting 4 contractors and 2 bank officials, telling a story about a deal he had closed in Abuja. The table was laughing. The wine was expensive. David's phone buzzed twice with messages he didn't check because the moment felt too good to interrupt. Both messages were from his CFO, a nervous man named Deli who had been trying to reach him since morning. The third message, which arrived while David was ordering dessert, said, "Call me. Tonight. It's about the Eco Bridge contract." David read it, frowned slightly, and put his phone face down on the table. He would deal with it tomorrow. Sandra was sitting in a small office in Ikoyi when David was ordering that dessert. The office belonged to Kemi Fashola, a woman who ran a private wealth advisory firm so discreet it had no public website and accepted clients only by referral. Kemi had managed Sandra's affairs for 6 years. She was calm and precise, and she spoke the way people speak when they are very sure of what they know. "The full consolidated figure," Kemi said, sliding a single printed page across the desk, "including the Abuja Land Corridor, the offshore trust, the logistics holdings, and the eco-development stake, is $38.4 billion. Sandra looked at the number. She had known it was large. Seeing it printed was different. "And David's company," Sandra said. Kemi opened a second folder. "His firm has 3 active contracts. 2 of them were secured through your indirect financing. The third, the Eco Bridge project, is funded almost entirely through the infrastructure vehicle your grandmother's land trust anchors. If that vehicle withdraws, the contract collapses within 60 days. Sandra was quiet for a moment. "And he doesn't know." "He has never known," Kemi said simply. Outside, a generator hummed. Somewhere in the building, a phone rang twice and stopped. Sandra thought about Olivia wetting the bed. She thought about Sophia, who used to sing in the car and had not sung in 4 months. She thought about standing at the door of her own house while Brenda handed her a 1-hour window with her daughters like it was a favor. She picked up the printed page, folded it once, and placed it in her bag. "I want to restructure the eco vehicle," she said, quietly. "And I want full legal documentation of every capital injection into David's firm going back to the beginning." Kemi nodded, unsurprised. "How soon?" 2 weeks. Sandra stood, smoothed her dress, and picked up her bag. She looked composed, the way she always looked. Still water. Noripil. But beneath that stillness, something had finally and completely hardened. David's CFO was trying to warn him about a problem with his biggest contract. But the problem had a name David would never have guessed in 1,000 years. Deli Martins had not slept in 2 days. He sat at his desk at 7 in the morning, surrounded by printed spreadsheets and cold coffee, staring at a number that should not have been possible. The Eco Bridge contract, David's largest, most celebrated deal, the one he referenced in every interview and dinner conversation, was built on a financial foundation that Deli had always assumed was a private equity firm called Cerulean Partners. He had assumed wrong. Cerulean Partners did not exist in any public registry. It had no website, no listed directors, no traceable address beyond a registered box in Mauritius. Deli had spent 2 days pulling threads, and every thread led to the same place, a holding structure anchored by a land trust registered in Ibadan in 1987 under the name of a woman called Orisa Coker. Orisa Coker was Sandra's grandmother. Deli sat back in his chair and pressed both hands over his face. He was not a man who frightened easily. But what he was looking at frightened him, because it meant that David's company, the thing David introduced himself with at every function, the thing he had built his entire personality around, had been quietly sustained by his wife for years without his knowledge. And David was currently in the process of divorcing that wife as aggressively as possible. Deli picked up his phone and called David for the 5th time. It rang out. David was in a good mood that morning. He had breakfast with Brenda on the balcony, and she had told him that Sandra had called twice about moving the visitation day, and David had said, "Tell her the schedule is the schedule," and Brenda had nodded and typed a response on his behalf, and David had felt, in that moment, completely in control of everything. He drove to the office at 9, greeted his receptionist, accepted his coffee, and settled into his chair with the particular satisfaction of a man who believes the world is arranged correctly. Deli was standing at his door before he could open his laptop. "Close the door," Deli said. Something in Deli's face made David set his coffee down. Deli put the folder on the desk and stood back. He did not explain it immediately. He let David read. He watched David's expression move from mild curiosity to confusion to something that looked almost like motion sickness. "What is this?" David said. It was not a question. "Cerulean Partners," Deli said carefully, "is not an external investor. It is a holding vehicle controlled by a trust that belongs to your wife's family. Sandra has been the indirect financier of the Eco Bridge contract from the beginning. And not just that contract." David looked up. "She funded the Abuja Road project in 2019, Deli continued. "She secured the credit line that kept us operational in 2021 when the bank reviewed our facility. The Lecky warehouse deal, the capital came through another vehicle she controls. Deli paused. David, I don't think she ever told you. The room was very quiet. David stood up slowly, the way a man stands when the floor feels uncertain. He walked to the window and looked out at Lagos and said nothing for a long time. He was thinking about every conversation where he had dismissed Sandra's opinion. Every dinner where he had spoken over her. Every morning he had handed his company's success story to an audience and accepted their admiration without once wondering where the foundation actually came from. Then he thought about Brenda upstairs in Sandra's house, wearing Sandra's robe, signing Sandra's visitation forms. How much, David said quietly, is she worth? Deli hesitated. We can only see what's connected to the firm. But based on what's visible, he paused again, it's significant. Generational. The kind of wealth that doesn't appear in newspapers. David turned from the window. His face had changed entirely. Find out if she's planning to withdraw, he said. Deli looked at him for a moment. David. She already called Kemi Fashola 2 weeks ago. The name landed like a stone in still water. David knew that name. Everyone in serious money circles knew that name. Kemi Fashola did not take meetings for maintenance. She took meetings for movement. Sandra had already begun, and David was only now realizing he had been standing on ground that belonged to her the entire time. David called Sandra that evening. She let it ring. Not because she was being petty, but because she was in the middle of something important. She was sitting at her kitchen table with Sophia doing homework, and Olivia was asleep on the couch with her head on Sandra's lap, and for the first time in months, both girls looked peaceful. Sandra was not going to interrupt that for David Williams. He called 4 more times. She turned the phone face down and helped Sophia with her fractions. David did not sleep that night. He lay in the dark staring at the ceiling while Brenda breathed quietly beside him, and he thought about every year of his marriage with a new and uncomfortable clarity. He thought about the contracts that arrived at the right time. The credit that held when it should have broken. The investors who appeared when his firm needed them most. He had always believed those things were the result of his own reputation, his own relationships, his own relentless drive. He had been wrong about almost everything. By 3 a.m. he was sitting alone in the kitchen with a glass of water, doing what proud men rarely do, measuring himself honestly. And the measurement was not comfortable. He picked up his phone and typed a message to Sandra, "We need to talk. Please." She read it at 6:15 the next morning while the girls ate breakfast. She showed no reaction. She set her phone down and asked Olivia if she wanted more eggs. The meeting happened 3 days later at a neutral location, a quiet restaurant in Ikoyi that Sandra chose and David agreed to without argument, which already felt different. He arrived first. He was dressed carefully, which Sandra noticed. David only dressed carefully when he was nervous or performing. Today she did not think he was performing. She sat down across from him and ordered water. He looked at her the way people look at someone they suddenly cannot fully see, like a painting they had walked past 100 times and only just noticed had depth. "I know about cerulean," he said. "I know you know," Sandra said. He was quiet for a moment. "How long?" "Since before we married," she said simply. "The structure existed before you. I built on it after." David absorbed that. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sandra looked at him steadily. "Would it have changed how you treated me?" He opened his mouth, closed it. The honest answer was something he was not ready to say out loud, and they both knew it. "I need you to not withdraw," he said finally. "The eco contract. If cerulean pulls out, the firm collapses. 400 employees, Sandra. People with families." Sandra listened to every word. She had expected this argument. It was a good argument, and it was also completely beside the point. "David," she said, "you had Brenda tell my daughters they could not call me without her permission. Olivia cried for 40 minutes outside your gate last Thursday because Brenda said the visit was cancelled and you didn't answer your phone." She paused. "You want to talk about consequences? Those are also consequences." David looked down at the table. "I'm not withdrawing to punish you," Sandra said. "I'm restructuring because the current arrangement no longer reflects reality. My lawyers will be in contact with yours about the asset disclosures. Everything will be transparent." She picked up her bag. "But I want unrestricted access to my daughter starting Monday. No schedule. No Brenda. No permission." She stood up. "Think carefully, David. You have a few days." She walked out of the restaurant into the bright Ikoyi afternoon, and she did not look back. David sat alone at the table, staring at nothing. finally understanding that the woman he had reduced to a visitor in her own children's lives had been holding his entire world in her hands the whole time. David made the wrong decision. Not immediately, he spent 2 days pretending he was considering Sandra's terms carefully, drafting responses with his lawyer, asking Deli quiet questions about whether the firm could survive without Cerulean's backing. Deli told him honestly that it could not. Not within any reasonable time frame. The eco contract alone represented 60% of the firm's active revenue. Without it, they were looking at immediate staff reductions, broken supplier agreements, and a credit facility that would likely be reviewed and withdrawn within 30 days. David heard all of that clearly. And then he called Brenda. That was the wrong decision. Brenda had spent 3 months carefully positioning herself inside David's life, and she understood one thing with great precision. Her comfort depended entirely on David's confidence. The moment he doubted himself, her position weakened. So when David told her about Sandra, about Cerulean, about the meeting in Ikoyi, Brenda did not encourage humility. She encouraged resistance. "She's bluffing," Brenda said simply. "Women like Sandra don't burn things down. They threaten and then they wait for you to come crawling. Don't crawl." David wanted to believe that. Badly. So he called his lawyer and instructed him to reject Sandra's visitation request and counter with a proposal that maintained Brenda's guardian approval process. He told Deli to begin exploring alternative financing. And he released a statement through his PR firm announcing the Eco Bridge contract milestone, with his photograph and his name and no mention of anyone else. Sandra read the statement on a Friday morning while drinking tea. She finished her tea. Rinsed the cup. Then she called Kemi. "Begin the restructure," she said. What happened next did not happen loudly. That was the thing people would discuss later, how quiet it was. No dramatic announcement, no press release, no confrontation. Cerulean Partners simply initiated a structured withdrawal from the Eco Bridge contract, citing a portfolio reallocation. Legal. Completely within the terms of the original agreement that David's own lawyers had signed without reading closely enough. Within 72 hours, the lead bank on the project requested an emergency review meeting. Within a week, 2 of the 3 contractors paused work pending financial clarification. Deli called David 8 times in one day. The 8th call David answered. "It's happening," Deli said. "It's actually happening." But Sandra was not watching David's firm collapse. She was in Ibadan. She had driven down on Saturday morning with Sophia and Olivia, windows down, music playing, the old songs her grandmother used to sing in the kitchen. They turned off the main road onto a dirt path that cut through tall grass, and when the house appeared, low and wide and old, with a mango tree in the front yard that Sandra had climbed 100 times as a child, Olivia pressed her face against the window and said, "Mummy, whose house is this?" "Ours," Sandra said. They spent the day walking the land. Sandra showed the girls the boundary markers her grandmother had placed decades ago, the quiet acres that had grown into something enormous through nothing more than patience and time. Sophia asked questions constantly, about the land, about Grandma Rose, about how one woman had managed all of it alone. She wasn't alone, Sandra said. She had people she trusted. And she never made noise about what she had. Olivia found a mango on the ground and held it up triumphantly. Sandra laughed. A real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep, and the sound of it moved through the trees and disappeared into the warm Ibadan afternoon. That evening, sitting on the low veranda while the girls chased fireflies in the yard, Sandra's phone lit up with a notification. A news alert. David's firm. Questions about the eco contract. Investors concerned. She looked at the notification for a moment. Then she turned the phone over. The fireflies were more interesting. But Monday was coming, and David, desperate and finally afraid, was about to do something that would make everything Sandra had planned completely unnecessary. Monday arrived gray and humid over Lagos. David showed up at Sandra's apartment unannounced at 8 in the morning, before she had taken the girls to school. He looked like a man who had not slept in 4 days, which was accurate. His shirt was clean but his eyes were not, and when Sandra opened the door and looked at him, she felt something she had not expected to feel. Not satisfaction. Not anger. Something closer to sadness. "The girls are eating breakfast," she said. "You have 10 minutes. He stepped inside and stopped when he saw Sophia and Olivia at the kitchen table. Olivia looked up and said, "Daddy," with the uncomplicated joy that small children offer even when they should not, and something moved across David's face that was too raw to be performance. He sat with them while they finished eating. He helped Olivia with her school bag. He told Sophia her braids looked nice. He did it quietly without audience, and Sandra watched from the doorway and said nothing. After she dropped the girls off, she came back to find him still there, sitting at her kitchen table with his hands folded in front of him like a man waiting for a verdict. He did not negotiate. That was what surprised her. He had come with no lawyer, no counter-proposal, no strategy borrowed from Brenda. He had come alone, and he spoke plainly, and what he said was this: that he had spent the last week sitting with the full weight of what he had done, not just to the firm, not just to himself, but to Sophia and Olivia, and to Sandra, who had carried him silently for years and received cruelty in return. He did not ask her to stop the restructure. He did not mention cerulean. He did not mention the eco-contract or the contractors or the bank review. He asked about one thing only. "Let me be their father properly," he said. "Whatever happens to the firm, I deserve that. But they don't deserve to lose both of us." Sandra looked at him for a long time. She thought about Grandma Rose, who used to say that forgiveness was not a gift you gave someone else. It was a weight you put down for yourself. "Brenda leaves the house," Sandra said, "this week. And you come to an agreement with my lawyer, not yours, about access. No schedules requiring third-party approval. No conditions." David nodded. "And you tell Sophia and Olivia the truth. Not everything, but enough. They are old enough to know that what happened was not their fault and not mine." He nodded again. His jaw was tight. "Okay," he said quietly. The restructure completed 3 weeks later. David's firm did not collapse entirely. Sandra's lawyers negotiated a controlled transition that protected the employees David had used as leverage in Ikoyi. It was not generosity toward David. It was precision. Sandra did not believe in burning things that held innocent people inside. Cerulean's withdrawal was replaced by a new vehicle, transparent this time, properly documented, with Sandra's name visible exactly where it belonged. Her full asset disclosure, when it emerged through the divorce proceedings, moved quietly through certain circles in Lagos like a current beneath still water. 38.4 billion. Generational. Structured across 2 decades of patience. Nobody who knew Sandra was surprised. Brenda left the house on a Wednesday. She did not say goodbye to the girls. 6 weeks after that Monday morning, Sandra took Sophia and Olivia back to Ibadan for a weekend. They sat under the mango tree in the late afternoon, the 3 of them eating groundnuts and watching the light change over Grandma Rose's land. Olivia had stopped wetting the bed. Sophia had started singing in the car again, quietly at first, then louder, the way children return to themselves when the fear lifts. Sandra leaned back against the tree and closed her eyes and listened to her daughter's voice move through the warm air. She had not won by being loud. She had not won by being cruel. She had won the way her grandmother had taught her, by being so deeply rooted that no storm could move her, and by knowing, even in her quietest and most painful moments, exactly what she was worth. The land stretched out before them, wide and patient and permanent. And Sandra Coker, who had never once needed anyone to announce her, sat beneath her grandmother's tree with her daughters and felt, for the first time in a long time, completely whole. We've come to the end of today's story. I hope it touched your heart. Thanks for watching and staying with us till the end. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. See you in the next one. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from?